Welcome back to Psychological Depth. In today's episode, we'll be diving into the topic, how dating apps are destroying marriages for women in their 30s. The profile looked promising. Attractive photos, decent bio, employed, educated, apparently functional. The conversation flowed well enough. The date was scheduled. She showed up prepared, outfit selected carefully, expectations managed, openness maintained. 3 hours later, she was driving home wondering what went wrong. Nothing catastrophic happened. He was pleasant. He was also clearly not looking for what she's looking for. Another evening spent with someone who wants company without commitment, connection without progression, the benefits of a relationship without the relationship itself. She's 34. The pattern has been repeating for years. The apps that were supposed to expand her options have somehow contracted them. The technology that promised to connect compatible people has instead created a marketplace where the connections feel endless, but the compatibility feels impossible. Every swipe represents possibility. Every date demonstrates how rarely possibility converts to actuality. Her friends report the same experiences. Women in their early 30s, mid-30s, approaching 40. All describing dating landscapes that seem designed to produce frustration rather than partnership. The men they meet are pleasant but non-committal. The ones who seem interested often aren't interested in what matters. The ones who want what she wants don't seem to want her specifically. Something has gone wrong between what these women were told dating would be and what dating has become. The script they absorbed, focus on yourself in your 20s, develop your career, travel, find yourself, and then settle down when you're ready. This script is producing outcomes nobody mentioned when the script was being promoted. Today, we're examining how dating apps are destroying marriage prospects for women in their 30s, not through dramatic failure, but through structural dynamics that accumulate toward the same outcome. The women inside this system often can't see the system clearly because they're inside it. The view from outside reveals patterns that explain their frustrations better than the explanations they've been given. The male experience on these platforms differs fundamentally from the female experience. Understanding the difference explains much of what's going wrong. Men on dating apps often describe a landscape of financial anxiety that affects their orientation toward commitment. The conversations women have on dates frequently reveal men who feel inadequate relative to expectations they believe exist. They're not earning what they hope to earn. They're not advancing as quickly as they expected. The financial foundation they believe they need for a serious relationship hasn't materialized. This matters because these men have absorbed messaging about what commitment requires. The provider role still operates in their understanding of what being a husband or father means. The man who feels he can't provide adequately doesn't feel ready for the commitments that would require provision. He dates, he enjoys companionship, but the progression toward permanence feels premature when his financial situation feels insufficient. The woman sitting across from him experiences this as rejection without understanding its source. He seems interested, he's engaging with her, but when she signals readiness for something serious, something in him withdraws. The withdrawal isn't about her, it's about his assessment of himself against standards he believes she holds. Some men respond to financial inadequacy by planning transitions. The career they're in feels capped. Real growth requires different credentials, different industry, different path. The path often runs through additional education. Additional education means additional debt. The debt pushes financial stability further into the future. The commitment that financial stability was supposed to enable gets pushed further too. The cycle repeats. He's dating while simultaneously preparing for a future that never quite arrives. Each step toward qualification produces another step still required. The woman who wanted commitment 3 years ago waits for a readiness that his self-assessment keeps postponing. Meanwhile, her timeline isn't indefinite. The biological constraints she navigates don't pause while he completes another degree. The family formation she envisioned requires timelines that his career navigation keeps violating. The mismatch between her timeline and his readiness produces the frustration she can't quite articulate but definitely feels. The women on these platforms often approach dating with different intention than the men they're meeting. She's looking for partner material. She's screening for long-term potential. She's assessing whether this person could be the father of her children, the partner for decades, the commitment that her timeline requires. He's often looking for something less defined, companionship that doesn't demand more than he's ready to give, connection that enhances his current life without restructuring it, physical intimacy that satisfies without entangling. He's not necessarily dishonest about this, but he's also not volunteering the clarity that would save her time. The mismatch produces systematic disappointment. She invests emotional energy in evaluating someone whose intentions never aligned with hers. The date that seemed promising reveals itself as another instance of fundamental misalignment. The hope that preceded the date converts to frustration that follows it. Repeated enough times, this pattern produces withdrawal. The woman who's experienced enough disappointment stops wanting to experience more. The energy required for hope, the preparation, the vulnerability, the showing up with openness, this energy depletes through repeated non-return. At some point, conservation becomes preferable to continued expenditure. She steps back from dating. Not permanently, she tells herself, just temporarily, just until she recovers, just until the exhaustion passes. The temporary becomes extended as the recovery she needed doesn't arrive, and the exhaustion doesn't lift. The dating pool she left continues without her. The exit compounds the problem. As women withdraw from active dating, the ratios shift further against women who remain. The men who are actively seeking now have even more options. The competition for their attention intensifies. The dynamics that were already difficult become more difficult. Some women who step back discover something unexpected. Life without dating is peaceful. The anxiety that accompanied constant swiping, constant evaluation, constant hope and disappointment cycling, this anxiety lifts. The mental space that dating consumed becomes available for other things. The peace begins to feel preferable to the chaos that preceded it. The preference creates its own problem. The woman who's adapted to single life has developed routines that work for her. The introduction of a partner would disrupt those routines. The accommodations that relationship requires feel like costs rather than investments. The openness she once felt toward partnership has calcified into something more protective. Financial independence develops during this period. The resources she would have shared with a partner accumulate to her alone. The lifestyle she's built depends on her income, the standards she's established for her life, housing, travel, experiences. These require resources that not every potential partner brings. The independence that makes her proud also shrinks her dating pool. The man who earns less than she does triggers concerns about contribution. The man whose lifestyle doesn't match hers triggers concerns about compatibility. The man who would have been acceptable before her independence developed no longer meets the standards her independence created. She didn't intend to price herself out of the market. The pricing happened gradually, through the same process that was supposed to make her a better partner. She became more accomplished, more stable, more capable, and simultaneously more selective in ways that reduce her options rather than expanding them. The trap closes without obvious moment of closure. She's accomplished, she's independent, she's not willing to tolerate disrespect or settle for less than she deserves. Each of these sounds admirable. Together, they produce a dating situation that feels impossible. The woman whose clip circulates online articulates this frustration clearly. Every man she meets seems stuck in careers, stuck in debt cycles, stuck in postponed readiness. She's ready now, they're not. The mismatch produces the futility she describes. The commentary that follows her clip often adds context she doesn't provide. The context concerns timing, what she chose to prioritize in years that preceded her current frustration. Many women in their 30s followed particular script during their 20s. Education was priority, career establishment was priority, self-development, travel, experience accumulation, all priorities. Relationship took positions somewhere in the sequence, usually not at the top. The script had logic. Build yourself before building a partnership. Know who you are before merging with someone else. Achieve independence so you enter a relationship from strength rather than need. The reasoning seemed sound. The outcomes it produces often don't match the reasoning. The woman who prioritized other things during her 20s often begins seeking serious relationship in her early 30s. She's ready now. She's done the building. She's confident in her identity. She's prepared for the partnership that her earlier development was supposed to enable. But the dating environment she enters at 32 differs from the one that existed at 25. The men she wants, established, stable, successful, these men have options they didn't have before. Younger women remain available. Women his own age compete for his attention. The scarcity she experiences contrasts sharply with the abundance she assumed would greet her. The competition she didn't anticipate intensifies everything. The successful man in his mid-30s or early 40s often selects from options that include women 5 or 10 years younger than him. His position allows the selection. His preferences might favor it. The woman his own age competes against women whose youth constitutes advantage she no longer possesses. This isn't fair by certain measures, but dating doesn't operate by fairness. It operates by preferences, and preferences often favor what she no longer has over what she's developed in its place. The career she built doesn't compensate for the youth that elapsed while building it. The accomplishments she accumulated don't function the way she assumed they would. Some observers describe this as pricing yourself out of the market. The concept is crude but contains truth. Each criterion she adds for acceptable partner reduces the population that meets the criteria.
The man who must be taller than her, earning more than her, more educated than her, geographically proximate to her, attractive to her, attracted to her, available, interested in commitment with her. Specifically, the intersection of all these requirements may be very small or empty entirely. The criteria often reflect what she's achieved herself. She has graduate degree, so he should too. She earns certain income, so he should earn more. The standards emerge from her own accomplishment, which makes them feel reasonable rather than arbitrary. But reasonable doesn't mean achievable. The man who meets all her criteria might be selecting from options that don't include her. Gender roles have shifted in ways that complicate these dynamics. Women today often earn as much or more than potential partners. The provider role that used to organize relationships has become ambiguous. The man who earns less than her faces questions about what he contributes. The woman who earns more faces questions about finding someone to contribute alongside. The traditional arrangement, his income supports the family while her labor makes the home function. This arrangement barely exists anymore except as reference point against which reality is measured. But the preferences evolved for that arrangement persist even as the arrangement itself has collapsed. She still wants someone who can provide. He still feels inadequate if he can't. Both are measuring against a template that no longer organizes actual life. Biological constraints add urgency that dating apps can't solve. The woman in her mid-30s navigating this landscape often does so with awareness that her window for family formation isn't indefinite. The children she imagined having require partnership that arrives in time. The partnership that keeps not arriving threatens the family that depends on it. This urgency can produce counterproductive pressure. The intensity she brings to dates emerges from the stakes she experiences. The man across from her senses the intensity and withdraws from it. Her need accelerates the departure of people who might have stayed if need hadn't driven them away. The urgency also triggers comparison with alternative paths. The friend who prioritized relationship early now has children. The colleague who settled down at 27 now has the family she's still seeking. The comparison produces the regret that asks whether different choices would have produced different outcomes. What men and women prioritize in partners differs in ways that shape these dynamics. The research is consistent. Men weight physical attractiveness and youth more heavily. Women weight status, resources, and stability more heavily. Neither weighting is wrong. They're different, emerging from different evolutionary pressures that don't update based on contemporary ideology. The practical effect? His preferences favor younger women even as he ages. Her preferences favor established men who become more selective as they establish. The intersection of these preferences at various ages produces the frustration she's experiencing. He can date younger, she often can't date equivalent in the other direction. The asymmetry isn't reversible through attitude adjustment.
The dating apps amplify rather than solve these dynamics. The technology that was supposed to expand options has instead revealed how limited options actually are when the full population is visible and sortable. The man she might have met through friends, through work, through organic circumstances, that meeting would have bypassed the evaluation that apps make explicit. On apps, everything is evaluation. The profile presents information for assessment. The swipe is acceptance or rejection based on that assessment. The conversation that follows is further evaluation. The date is extended evaluation. Everything is sorting, filtering, measuring against criteria that become explicit through the process that makes them explicit. Organic meeting operates differently. You meet someone through context that provides other information. Your friend's coworker comes with your friend's implicit vetting. The guy at the climbing gym shares an activity that provides common ground. The circumstances that produce meeting also provide context that apps can't replicate. The app-based evaluation tends toward criteria that advantage some populations over others. The criteria that appear on profiles, height, income, education, these favor the men who rank highly on measurable dimensions. The qualities that don't appear on profiles, humor, kindness, compatibility in ways that require interaction to assess, these get subordinated to what screens can display. The woman searching on apps optimizes for what apps can show her. The optimization may bypass men she'd actually be happy with, in favor of men who present well on the metrics that apps make salient. The matching that results might not match what would emerge from different introduction mechanisms. Meanwhile, the apps themselves optimize for engagement rather than matching. The company succeeds when users keep using the app. Users who find partners stop using the app. The incentive structure doesn't actually favor helping users find partners. It favors keeping them engaged in the searching process indefinitely. The endless scroll of options produces its own pathology. The awareness that more options exist, always more, just one more swipe away, undermines commitment to any particular option. Why settle when something better might be next? The question repeats indefinitely because options literally are endless. The commitment that relationship requires conflicts with the abundance that apps provide. For women in their 30s seeking marriage, these dynamics combine into perfect storm. The men their age often aren't ready. The men who are ready often prefer younger options. The apps that were supposed to help actually amplify the problems. The criteria that seemed reasonable actually price them out. The time that passes makes everything harder rather than easier. The frustration the woman in the video expresses emerges from this combination. She's not wrong that the men she meets seem stuck. She's not wrong that commitment keeps not happening. What she may not see is how the system she's in was designed in ways that produce exactly her experience. Advice to women earlier in the process would have to address these dynamics before they compound. The woman in her early 20s absorbing the "focus on yourself first" message might benefit from understanding what that message produces for women who follow it. The message isn't entirely wrong. Self-development matters, career matters, identity matters. But the messages typically delivered ignores timing constraints that don't pause while development occurs. The woman who develops herself throughout her 20s may arrive at her 30s developed but facing dating market that doesn't reward what she developed. The alternative isn't abandoning development for relationship desperation at 22. The alternative is honest assessment of what different timing produces. The woman who seeks partnership earlier, while still developing, while still young in ways that dating markets value, this woman often has options that delay forecloses.
The options at 25 include men who are also 25, still becoming who they'll be, available for partnership that grows rather than partnership fully formed. The 32-year-old woman seeking these men often can't access them. They're seeking women in their 20s. The pool available to her at 32 differs from the pool that would have been available at 25. This isn't argument for settling early with whoever appears. It's argument for understanding that the sequence matters. The development and the partnership don't have to be sequential. They can be concurrent. The relationship that forms early and develops alongside personal development may produce better outcomes than the relationship sought after development completes. Men receive parallel advice from different direction. The man who feels financially inadequate and therefore postpones commitment might recognize that readiness is somewhat constructed. The standard he's measuring against, full financial establishment before relationship, this standard may be higher than reality requires. The woman who would make excellent partner might not need his finances at the level he imagines. She might value him for things beyond his income. She might be willing to build together rather than requiring that he arrive fully built. The assumption that keeps him postponing might not match what she actually wants. The man who understands this can approach commitment earlier than his internal standard suggests. The career development continues. The relationship develops alongside it. The partnership that forms isn't a partnership of two finished products. It's partnership of two people becoming who they'll become together. This orientation produces different outcomes than the sequential approach. He's not waiting until he's ready, because readiness keeps receding. She's not waiting until she's developed, because development is concurrent with relationship. Both are making the bet that partnership enhances rather than obstructs what they're building individually. The men worth encouraging toward this orientation are men who want families, who value partnership, who simply misunderstand the timing. The realization that perfect readiness never arrives might free them from indefinite postponement. The woman who wants him might not be seeking the perfection his self-criticism demands. But the advice to men also includes careful selection. The partner for decades of shared life should be chosen carefully. The woman who seems exciting but demonstrates patterns that don't serve long-term partnership. She might not be the one to build with, regardless of how attracted he is. The careful selection involves evaluation of her character, her relationship to her own family, her patterns in previous relationships, her capacity for partnership versus her capacity for consumption. The evaluation that apps make difficult becomes essential. The information that profiles don't provide becomes the information that actually matters. The dating environment that both genders navigate has become genuinely difficult. Not difficult in ways that previous generations faced, different difficult, new difficult, difficult that emerged from conditions that didn't previously exist. The apps that were supposed to solve scarcity created new problems of abundance without compatibility. The gender role shifts that were supposed to liberate created new confusions about contribution and expectation. The messages about self-development that were supposed to produce better partners produced timing misalignments that undermine partnership. None of this is any individual's fault. The woman in her 30s, frustrated by dating, didn't design the system that frustrates her. The man postponing commitment didn't choose the financial pressures that make commitment feel premature. Both are navigating structures that emerge from forces beyond their control.
But within those structures, choices remain. The choices that different timing would produce, the choices that different criteria would enable, the choices that honest assessment of the dynamics would inform. The woman who understands the market she's in can adjust rather than continuing strategies that the market punishes. The adjustment isn't abandoning her standards, it's understanding which standards serve her and which limit her in ways that don't serve. The man who understands his postponement as choice rather than necessity can choose differently. The commitment that felt premature might become timely through shifted understanding rather than shifted circumstances. The dating apps will continue operating as they operate. The incentives that misalign with user interests will continue driving the platforms. The dynamics that advantage some populations while disadvantaging others will persist, regardless of whether anyone finds them fair. Within this environment, the individual seeking partnership must develop wisdom the environment doesn't provide. The wisdom about timing, about criteria, about what actually produces the partnerships that apps promise and rarely deliver. The marriage that the woman in her 30s seeks won't come from another 1,000 swipes. The volume of options isn't the problem. If anything, it's part of the problem. The marriage she seeks comes from realistic assessment of what she's doing, what it's producing, and what different approaches might produce instead. The assessment is uncomfortable. It requires examining whether the choices she's made have contributed to the outcome she faces, not through blame — this system deserves most of the blame — but through honest evaluation of what falls within her control and whether she's exercising that control effectively. The adjustment might involve different platforms, different criteria, different orientation toward the men who appear. It might involve stepping outside apps entirely to pursue connection through contexts that provide what apps can't. It might involve geographical flexibility, or criteria flexibility, or timeline flexibility. What it can't involve is more of the same while expecting different results. The pattern that's produced her current frustration will continue producing it. The change has to come from somewhere. The somewhere is her own choices within whatever constraints the environment imposes. For men observing these dynamics, different lessons apply. The man who's postponing commitment might ask whether his postponement serves him. The man selecting from abundant options might ask whether his selection criteria serve long-term partnership. The man confused about what women want might recognize that what different women want differs, and that finding the one whose wants align with what he offers matters more than satisfying universal female preference. Both genders navigate an environment that didn't exist until recently and that nobody fully understands. The apps have been around for barely a decade. The social changes that produced current dynamics have been unfolding for generations but haven't stabilized. Nobody knows where this is going. Within the uncertainty, the goal remains constant: forming partnerships that produce good lives for the people in them and the families they build. The goal hasn't changed. The path toward the goal has become confused by conditions nobody chose and nobody fully controls. The woman in her 30s, frustrated by dating apps, deserves sympathy. Her frustration is legitimate. The system is genuinely difficult. But sympathy doesn't solve her problem. Only adjusted strategy solves her problem. If solutions remain available, and determining whether solutions remain available requires honest assessment that sympathy can make harder to achieve, the apps will continue destroying marriages they claim to enable. The dynamics we've examined will continue operating. The women in their 30s who don't understand those dynamics will continue being ground down by them. Understanding doesn't guarantee escape, but it makes escape possible in ways that confusion doesn't allow. The woman who sees the system clearly can navigate it deliberately rather than being navigated by it blindly.
For those experiencing the patterns described here or from either side, share what you've observed, what's working, what's failing. What would you tell yourself at an earlier stage? The collective experience illuminates territory that individual navigation can't fully map. The apps aren't going away. The dynamics will persist. The question is how you navigate what exists rather than what you wish existed. So, what are your thoughts on today's topic? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel Psychological Depth so you won't miss any of our upcoming posts. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.